to order. This is a regular meeting of the Board of Uplift Education. It's Tuesday, June 27, 2017, and it's about 4:35. Thank you all for braving the weather. Oh my gosh, we all swam here, and that shows our dedication to a good cause. We do not have quorum yet. Some people, I'm sure, are trapped on the toll road. And I think what we'll do is start. I'd like to start by welcoming some people to our organization and to being a guest with us today. And I'll start basically with Christy Erickson, who is our new Chief People and Innovation Officer. Yep. Great title. Okay. Mark Wiley. Where's Mark? Mark Wiley. Mark Wiley. Okay. If you need Yasmin, talk with Mark. And
and if Mark sends you an email, respond, just like it's the same way I sent it to you. So don't ignore it and hit delete.
Mark is basically the chief of staff. Okay, so we all get what that means. That's terrific. We have a new primary MD, Caitlin McDermott, and we're so pleased that you're with us. So, Bryce.
Many schools,
including exactly. But yes, so that's a good come together of you two. And then I'd like to welcome a guest also, Lee Small, who is a friend of Kevin's. And welcome. We're glad you're here. We're going to go to some items that do not require a vote. So we're going to slip down to Cassie Hubbard, who's going to talk about career exposures for our juniors. So,
yeah.
Cassie.
Awesome. Is there, there's a clicker on there. Okay. So I know most of you guys have heard about our career experiences that we started this year because a lot of you participated in some way by having a company participate or having your company host, and we're incredibly grateful for that. So just wanted to provide you guys sort of a year-end wrap-up and then also share moving forward what next year is going to look like for us. So just a reminder about the goals of our initiative and a sample trip overview here. For those of you who haven't seen it, so we wanted to provide our junior class with opportunities to experience what career options existed for them outside of the ones that they are already very familiar with. So we visited Here's Infinity at Pizza Hut in November. So we visited 14 companies over the course of the year. Every junior, had the opportunity to visit a company. Some had the opportunity to visit more than one. So more pictures at Deloitte. You can see Ed hiding in the corner there and Carrie Carter. And then also our juniors at Mighty went to BDO. So this is really small font, but just thought that it was important to share some feedback from our scholars about what their experience was on these trips. So just some highlights. I think we saw that from this feedback, the actual practical advice that they got was really great in helping them to understand what career options existed for them, what they needed to do to achieve certain careers, but they were also really motivational based off the folks that we had speaking to them at all of these different companies. So I won't stay too long on this because we have more feedback. And this slide really highlights that. I think the first quote, the student said it was inspiring to see minorities flourishing in their craft, really hits in on the fact that our kids were able to picture themselves in some of these careers and were really inspired by the folks that they met and heard from on the various career panels at the opportunities. And then I also just included some feedback from some of the companies that hosted us. Overall, I think everyone was incredibly impressed with our scholars and their level of interaction, and almost everyone, at least verbally, committed that they would love to have the kids back again next year. So as far as next steps go, the MDs, high school MDs, Yasmin, Rich, development team, Road to College team got together at the end of this year to talk about this feedback, to talk about the success of the trips, and develop a more cohesive plan moving forward for what this upcoming year will look like. So that is going to be sophomore trips to large companies that would provide exposure to some younger group of kiddos about what career opportunities exist for them. And then having junior trips be opt-in trips for our 11th graders in more specialized industries. So the two groups that we had this year of companies, ours is kind of divided in half. So some of those companies will ask to host sophomores next year, some will ask to host juniors based off what their specialties are. And it is also going to help us alleviate some planning issues we had with the junior class, just based off everything that they have going on in a very busy 11th grade year. So our school leaders right now are deciding on those dates, and we're going to be reaching out to companies to get some dates on the schedule for visits in this upcoming year. And Road to College is working on formalizing some pre and post work for scholars to make sure they're getting the most out of these excursions as well. So I think the biggest thing from you guys is thank you so much for your connections that truly led to almost every single one of these corporate visits this year. But we're also adding a whole new class of students who are going to need trips for this coming year, and would love to continue to get your connections and your recommendations for companies that we should be targeting. So anyone that has those connections, I think we saw the most success from people who reached out and sort of buttered their friends up first about the opportunity and shared what a great organization we are, and then connected them with me to move forward for next steps. And so we're looking for all kinds of companies, groups that would host 20 juniors all the way up to 150 sophomores. So truly anyone we would love to hear from. And my email address is just chuber@uplifteducation.org. I was copied on Yasmin's board email, so feel free to email me if you want more materials, like written materials that you could share with folks that you want to ask about Uplift or about this program specifically. I can provide any of that to help you guys make that ask. Jump on any phone calls that you think would be important, and whatever makes the most sense for y'all's asks.
How long are the visits usually?
They typically were from about 10 a.m. to 2 p.m., depending on the site and the number of kids that we had.
We have a pretty standard agenda that we can give as an exemplar, but also we work with companies to be flexible based on what they need.
That was gonna be my question. What kind of agenda do we just take a tour of the building?
Here, I'll go back. So I think it'll differ a little bit as we think about what a sophomore trip looks like and what a junior trip looks like, but this is the sample agenda we used this year. So a welcome from an executive, intro of the company or an industry overview. The career panel is where we had younger folks that our students could relate to, come and speak to our kids with a set grouping of questions that we had helped the company develop, and then we opened it up to the students to ask questions as well about their college experiences, their career paths, their choices that have led them to those individual roles. Then we did guided office or campus tours depending on the setting, and our company partners provided lunch for our scholars, and in most cases ate lunch with our scholars too, to give them more time to interact face to face. And then with the exception of one company, we did an interactive or industry related activity. So at Pizza Hut, that looked like kids getting together in groups and using some marketing parameters and consumer insights to develop their own pizza, which was super fun. Obviously that didn't happen at any other company that we visited, but companies were really creative about what that looked like and how to engage the kids in something other than just sitting and listening. And I worked with each company to help them think through those things. And we would do that with anyone that felt uncomfortable or didn't know what that might look like for their organization as well. And then some sort of wrap up or closing from the MC of the day or that another executive closing out the day for them as well. All right.
Well, that's a fabulous first year is all I can say. Unbelievable. So, it's so important to our scholars. Really, really important.
Lots of juniors benefited from it. Thank you, Cassie.
So I think we now have quorum, so we'll go back to the consent agenda. The minutes have been sent out. Need to have a motion for approval. hear a motion?
So moved.
Thank you. Second? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Passed. Thank you so much. We'll go on to our regular reports and,
Academic update?
yeah, let's
Great.
start with the academic update.
PowerPoint.
Is there a PowerPoint we can put up?
Mark, do you have the PowerPoint to put up at the side? Yes.
Good. While that's being pulled up, I'll just talk about the executive summary and the board report around our STAR performance data that we received from grades 3, 4, 6, and 7. We shared the 5th grade and 8th grade and the end of courses earlier. Those tests are given in March, so that informs of summer school placement. We wrapped up with our first phase of summer school, so we'll be sharing that data a little bit later. But we did receive our 3rd, 4th, 6th, 7th grade data for STAR, and Yasmin and I have been talking very deeply about the results. It was not a good year for our schools in general, and I'm going to talk a little bit about that in more detail. But a few takeaways. One is we anticipate having 2 schools that are going to be on the improvement required list. Those 2 schools being Uplift Grand Primary and Uplift Gratis in South Dallas. We did have 4 schools that did not meet Index 1, which is kind of the first line of with the aggregate tests that were given and passed above a 60% threshold. 4 schools did not hit that. Those 2 plus Mighty and Meridian Primary in Fort Worth. However, those 2 schools, we do think that they will meet Index 2, which is a requirement around how subpopulations perform. And actually, those schools had a couple of grade levels that had meaningful increases in advanced scores, subpopulation scores. So we feel that based on our calculations with what the TEA used last year, we think those schools are going to meet Index 2, and you have to hit one of 2. Preferably we want all schools to hit both. However, both Gratis and Grant Primary did not hit either of those. So we do envision having 2 IR schools. That is not acceptable to us, and we do need to address our low pass rates. In terms of our primary schools, the math results were flat, slightly decreasing, with a considerable drop in pass rates in our reading scores. Over the last 3 years, you could see a visible decline of almost 10 to 12% in terms of reading pass rates, and all in, if you look at 3rd through 5th grade pass rates on STAR and reading, you're looking at 63% of the kids who passed on the first administration. And so that is an area of concern for us. For primary, though, we did see an increase in advanced rates. And it's pretty uncommon to see districts drop in pass rates but increase in advanced rates. And I'm going to talk a little bit about that in more detail. But what it does signal is that we're doing a better job of supporting our high students, which was a problem we had a couple of years ago, and not as good of a job supporting our low students. In our middle schools, the scores were largely flat, slightly decreasing, with minimal change in advanced scores. So we did have some tough conversations with our leaders, our managing directors, me and Yasmin, about what do we need to do next. So I'm going to talk a little bit about that at a high level. First is, with our challenges in our primary reading scores, with 63% of the kids across 3rd, 4th, 5th grade, you're looking at 4,000 students almost. It's a third of them are not passing a basic reading assessment, and we need that to increase. So we are taking a much more direct approach in how we want literacy being taught in our schools. In previous years, we've given just a range of autonomy in terms of reading, writing programs, time spent on phonics, and time spent on different parts of the reading curriculum. And going into this next year, we want to be more explicit about what it is that we need executed on a day-to-day, non-negotiable, because we are seeing just a wide range of performance within our schools, but also a wide range of performance within our buildings. And I'll just give a couple of examples. One is Uplift Triumph. We had pass rates around 60 to 63%. The advanced rates were really high at 35, 38%. And so you're looking at a school, a relatively new school, where a third of the kids are failing, did not pass STAR. A third passed, and a third scored advanced. And how do we want our school leaders and our teachers to meet that wide range of student need is actually a very challenging task to make sure all of them are succeeding at the rates that we need them to. So that's going to be a big push for us in terms of focusing on our literacy framework. Two is we need to really think about how we're using our centralized instructional coaches. That team largely spends time with first-year teachers that are going through our alternative certification program. And the case that we wanted to use was Uplift Lee. Uplift Lee, as you know, we had some leadership challenges. Priscilla took on the leadership at that school. With just how we opened the school, we had a devoted instructional coach tied to that campus to not only help the school, but also participate in the kind of the cross-pollination of ideas that between us and Grand Prairie. And that school was the second highest performing third grade school in the network. And I don't think any of us could have predicted that Lee, which has been a great experience for us partnering with the district, but had its challenges, a little bit messy here and there, but nobody would have expected that to be the second highest school in the network. And Priscilla did credit just how she managed the instructional coach, supporting teachers and students in a manner that really peaked their impact. So we do need to look at how we're allocating some of our central personnel. And then the last part is just, just a real reflection on how we're managing as managing directors and managing a larger portfolio of schools. The Charter School Growth Fund used the term whack-a-mole in terms of what we do. 5, 6 years ago, our college readiness results were really low. We worked really hard on ACT, and that popped, but our reading data went down. Our math data in primary is better than our reading. We're serving our high kids better now than our low kids, and we're doing this whack-a-mole game, and that is just not good for a growing organization and for the consistency that our students deserve. They need to be in a school where they're going to appropriately hit their growth targets and get to the level of college readiness that they need to go to. So really, our management style has lent itself to the whack-a-mole, and we do realize that there are going to be some just cognizant shifts that we need to make in how we're managing, progress monitoring all schools, because the data that I'm going to walk through in more detail, it is unacceptable that there's a good percentage of students that are not getting the rich experience that they deserve. So I'll pause right there to see if there are any kind of questions before I jump into kind of the next level granular data by elementary and middle schools.
Yeah, Rich, let me ask you, to what extent do you think we were surprised by these results?
I think there were some schools that we expected, that we had preliminary data that we knew were not going to perform as well. I would say that would be half. The other half did come at a surprise. And part of the challenge with the STAR data is that we don't really have district or state comps yet. So it's hard to tell how did relatively all schools and students in the state perform. But that's still not an excuse. We can't use that as an excuse for that many kids not passing the state assessment in the basic reading context.
In many ways, our being surprised is the factor that troubles me the most.
Yep.
And I would expect that our testing of children leads us to understand the gaps and allows us to get in and fix them. If we know we have struggling kids, that may be just a fact of life.
And that's where, to kind of the point around consistent and tighter management. I think, let's say if there are a small handful of schools that have some indicators based on our common assessments or mapping that tell us that they need more support. There's actually how those directors and how our managing directors support those schools does vary from leader to leader. And that's where we need to get more consistent on. There is a singular playbook that we need to execute when 3rd and 4th grade reading data is low, right? Rather than really creating a little bit of autonomy around problem solving, which it doesn't necessarily help with the standardization of results that we need. And at the end of the day, I think how it's playing out is we're creating, we're not bringing to the middle school college-ready students. We did have weaker results in 6th and 7th grade, so that puts a lot of pressure on the 8th grade team. In high school as well, we didn't do, as I shared last time, our end of course exams in the 9th and 10th grade overall did not do well. And that creates more responsibility for the junior and senior teachers. So we do need to just make sure that there's consistency in execution so that we're not kind of piling on in some of the later grades where, we had to turn it up more so because of the underachievement.
Rich, have you guys, this question I guess goes right to the heart of budget, but have you used the word allocate resources a couple of different times when you were giving your explanation?
Yep.
Have you guys looked at, and it goes also to the whack-a-mole issue, how much you're having to take this star team over here and move them over here to solve this problem, but then now all of a sudden you don't have the star team over here? How much is reallocate resources versus a need for more of those kind of superstar resources?
I think those school teams are pretty consistent.
Yeah.
That are there. I think we're talking about central office resources and how we're deploying those more strategically.
But it's kind of the same.
Yes, on that part,
Allocate
yes,
versus
yes.
Yeah.
But I don't
having
think it's on the
more
campus
need.
side.
Yeah.
I think it's on the central office side.
And I
Which
also,
is a good point on that.
if there's one kind of role type that we do have on campuses, we do have, at each school, there's anywhere from 1 to 3 intervention specialists, is what we call them. These are intervention teachers. One of the things that the data help us realize is, we need much more structure for that role. For example, if you're a regular 3rd grade teacher or an Algebra 2 teacher, we have curriculum, we have lesson unit plans, assessments to monitor that teacher's progress. However, an interventionist is working with small groups of students, hopefully with the students that need the most support, which are going to be our kids on the lower band of performance. What we did find, though, is that the rates, and I'll show this in just a few minutes, the rates of growth as well as the rates of achievement from our students below the 40th quintile has been going down. So really there's been a push for us to think about, we are allocating people to those specific students, and are we really getting them to provide the value in terms of measurable academic value that we need so that those students are catching up, pass rates are going up, and they're just actively moving kids from, let's say, the 1st, 2nd quintile groups nationally to national average. And because really our sweet spot right now are kids slightly above national average. And where our sweet spot a few years ago was below national average and getting those kids to national average. So I think in terms, we do need to assess that position. We probably have 70 to 80 intervention teachers across the network that we do need to maximize their value for those students.
Rich, one of the things that we kind of looked at this nationally is it's really, really hard to do both well, to do advanced kids well, particularly in one classroom, and to do really low kids well at the same time. And I was wondering if you looked at any models like the rocket ship model out of California. What they did was they basically broke the whole model, put kids in small groups where you're in tutoring based on their level. You're in tutoring, you're in online, you're with the master teacher. I mean, they really tried to do it very differently to get each of those 5 groups what they needed every day. And it was very complicated from a schedule standpoint. But I just wonder if there's lessons, or if you're looking at some of those other like very different kind of models to try to deal with the fact that you're getting more kids that are less prepared than ever before.
I just want to echo that. We've toured schools throughout the country, and the station rotation model is often called blended learning, which I'm sure you're familiar with as well. But it's not 30 kids with a teacher and then 30 kids in the computer lab. It literally is breaking them up, and not just you're an early bird and you're a late bird for the entire year, but basically every month you get a new small group based on your reading proficiency and a different small group based on your math proficiency. So there's less stigma attached to it. You're just constantly moving. And it's complicated, but with the data that Uplift tracks, I think it's really quite feasible. But it's a very different mindset, because the teacher is teaching anywhere from 5 to 10 kids at a time, as opposed to any sort of full classroom. I mean, there is some full classroom instruction too. I don't want to say there isn't. Anyway, we are definitely seeing that taking off.
Yeah, and I do think that is the direction we want to head, but I do think that's going to require a little bit more tightening on the part of our management, because both Yasmin and I have seen these schools,
Yeah.
and I think schools that take that on and run with it, that there can be varied performance, because it does really take kind of tight, centralized expectations and leadership to make sure that that type of instruction, moving from more whole group to small group, more adaptive, kind of within the school year. How do we do that with discipline to make sure all schools do that? We're not in that place yet, but I think that's where the team of managing directors, Yasmin and I, we've spent some time to really just think through. Let's be tight about these expectations, so that when we do make strategic moves in grade levels or content areas that would benefit from structures like this, it's all classrooms, all schools doing it, rather than a few here, a few there, and creating a whack-a-mole by practice that's going to impact the results at the end of the day.
So I'll just build on that and connect on this. So, I would never call us like a heavy blended school, because we're not. This notion of all schools being more consistent in practice and practices that are working, we definitely have primary schools that do guided math just like you would guided, and have kids moving in rotations where there's a group on the computer, a group doing independent practice, a group at a kidney table with a teacher who are doing differentiated instruction based on that group of kids. And yes, our data easily lends ourselves to be able to pull groups. That is a different teacher professional development, and one that everybody has to get really tight on. And then similarly, I think what we saw when we broke into our literacy scores is what is happening at the same kidney table when you get to primary literacy is varying too much, and we were leaving it too much to both teacher and school leader autonomy of what's their philosophy on the best way of using that time versus this is the exemplar, and being really prescriptive about what happens. And so that's some of the work that's been happening over the past month to make sure that when our school leaders come back from vacation, they are getting very clear expectations from us of what we want to happen during that instructional time, and then cascading that to what we want to happen to teachers. And the recognition that our primary MDs had in a recent meeting was we also just can't trust it to a cascade model of our directors train our teachers on it. There are some things that we are going to have to send in our central office teaching and learning team to SWAT team go in and train teachers directly on, because we need to move quicker, and we can't wait for that training to catch up.
The other thing I know when we talk to the models is that the scheduler, like having a full-time person that's just working on scheduling, was really, really important when you start trying to move everybody around in those.
Yes.
So I'm going to jump into some of the data. Here are primary schools. Yasmin talked a little bit about this at our team meeting. We need our schools north of 70 as it relates to index 1. We need 70% of our students at each school passing their assessments. And We have, again, the 4 schools that I shared that are below 60. We do have a group of schools that have barely made it, right? Williams, Infinity, and Hampton. And so our hope is that taking a really tight approach in primary especially will lift those up going into this next year. In middle school, kind of similar. There are, even though everyone made it above that 60 threshold, that's the minimum from the state, about half of our schools are below our 70 line. And so we definitely want to monitor Heights, Hampton, Mighty, Pinnacle, and Grant to make sure that they are implementing our middle school curriculum a little bit more actively. In high school, this doesn't mean our high schools are performing better. The assessment thresholds are different in high school because the state wants students to graduate, and so the thresholds are a little bit lower, or lower on the test so that more kids pass and graduate high school. So, we need really our high schools to be above the 80 line, kind of north of Hampton. And so really monitoring Mighty especially, they barely made that 60 threshold. They are a school that we're just a few points away from being IR this year. But we need to make sure that Luna Peak and Heights are kind of making that step into the 80s and above in high school. Just very quickly, 3rd grade reading. If you look at this, these are the trends over the last 3 years. You see that flat math slightly drop over the last 3 years in math. A pretty sharp drop of 13% in reading over the last 3 years. But again, we do have this advanced rate increase. And so, we do want to be able to, as Angela kind of pointed out, do both. Get more kids to pass and move more kids like we have been into the advanced range. 4th grade, again, slightly lower math scores. If you look over the 3 years, a 12-point drop in reading. We did have increases from last year to this year in advanced rates. Very similar problem in 4th grade. And then we just pulled up the 5th grade data that we shared last time. Again, a sharp drop in reading pass rates. Math has been flat. And we do need to make sure that by the time they're in 5th grade, these are the lion's share of students have been with us for 5-6 years. So we do need to make sure that that is, we're reversing that trend. This is something that I'll usually share at the board retreat, but I would love to share with you a preview now. This is our MAP assessment that we use, our nationally normed reference test, and this tells you where our buckets of students were in our quintile groups. So first through 20th percentile, 20 to 40, 40 to 60, and so forth. And we started the year with more students at or north of national average. But when we measured for growth this year, we lowered, let's say, our quintile 1 and 2 students by just 1% or 2, increased quintiles 3 and 4. We did not make the visible growth that we wanted. Really, we do need to get to a place where less than 20% of our students are in quintiles 1 and 2, with 80% of our students in quintiles 3 and higher. That's going to just dramatically increase our rates of college readiness, because our college readiness line is really right here. Kids in the top 40% nationally are going to be positioned over time for college. Reading, again, similar data where we did lower the number of students in quintile 1, but for the most part, we did not see that dynamic shift that we have seen in previous years on our nationally normed reference tests. I'm going to skip a couple of slides and move to kind of the point that Yasmin and I kind of alluded to of, before we've been in let's say 3-4 years ago, we did a really great job of moving our low kids to national average, slightly above national average. Now that we have more students north of national average, we've actually done a better job of moving our quintiles 3, 4, 5 kids than our low kids. And so here is, out of the 4,000 students across grades 3 through 5, this is where they ended up in the spring. We ended up with this distribution. Now, if you look at the kids in the 3rd quintile, national average and higher, if you look at their rates of growth, 55, 60, 70, 50 is national average. So our kind of top kids are doing incredibly well. And they are passing star at rates of 80, 95, 97. So these kids are passing star at high levels. However, if you look at our students who ended in the bottom 2 quintile groups, those are students who did not, for the most part, meet their growth goals, actually lower than national average. On average, you're looking at 20 to 30% of those students passing star, which not passing star, which leads us to pass rates in the high 60s. And so, really, if you were to look at this snapshot of 2 assessments given in the spring, STAR and MAP, we've definitely added tremendous value to the kids north of national average. We need to do a much better job, and so that's where we do need to share this feedback with our directors, our deans, our intervention teachers, so that we're more cognizant of ensuring that our low students are hitting their growth targets and better positioning themselves to pass STAR. Now, this is how this is playing out. If you were to look 3 years ago, our students in the bottom 2 quintile groups passed at 43, 44% 3 years ago. This year, the same group of low students passed this round of state tests at 31 and 28%. And one could hypothetically say that if we were to keep those pass rates at that 40-something line, we wouldn't have pass rates in the 60s, we would have pass rates in the mid-70s. And so we do need to be more cognizant about how we're setting up our low students and supporting them, because again, this whack-a-mole has led to a program that has benefited our average, above average kids, and we need to do a much better job for our low students. In middle school did not had similar trends in terms of a slight decline in pass rates, with no change in advanced scores. So one of the big pushes for 6th and 7th grade is to really make sure that more students are passing, but we're moving students from, let's say, the high band pass into advanced, because it is important that we get to the point where 30-40% of our students are scoring advanced on a regular basis in our middle schools. And then 8th grade. And then similarly, I'm going to go to our low students in the 6th through 8th grade, where a few years ago you're looking at 46%, 52% passing their state assessments from our 1st and 2nd quintile groups, and there's a pretty sharp decline by 10% and 4% respectively in reading and math of our low students passing. And again, we do need to make sure that we have a support system in place for our low students. We do have in the appendix, if you're interested in individual schools, I will say that there were a couple of schools in primary that I do want to share. Williams, Luna, Summit, and Triumph, that really had some sharp increases in advanced scores, upwards of 10, 12% in some cases. But overall, for those of you who are interested in how individual schools performed over a 3-year period in terms of their improvement, those are there. But again, I think the key message is we just have to get tighter in these grades because those scores are unacceptable, and I think we're responding appropriately. But it is going to be kind of a shift in terms of how we manage and just the follow-through of expectations that we need our directors to follow. I'll take any questions and
Questions, comments? Well, I have a comment that is both positive and probably less positive. One is thank you very, very much for all you're doing. in addressing this. Also, thank you for the data that you are providing everyone to see. I mean, that gives us the information we need to move forward. Obviously, you've heard from the board members, and going all the way back to when we did the strategic plan, academics are absolutely the number one priority for us, for our scholars, and also for the reputation of our of Uplift. So I just urge you to focus your attentions, and that includes all of you. And it's a great team. I'm very impressed and proud to be the chair of this board with the team that we have. But I urge you to make this your top priority.
I'll just have a closing comment to that. A lot of emotions around these scores: disappointment, anger, frustration. We spent a year focused on literacy professional development, and it yielded us nothing. And so we do need to change how we are being directed in targeted ways, and making sure that all children are getting a great education. And the fact that we dropped the ball on our most vulnerable scholars is completely unacceptable. And so we are making, I think, the right pivots for next year. And then also the way I'm going to spend my time is going to look different. And I think my personal reflection was I spent a lot of time on advocacy, and while that's the right long term with the organization, like that was not where we needed to be in the short term. And our campuses and our MDs needed more visibility and presence from me. And so, I fully own these scores on behalf of our team and what my role was in them. And one of the things I've told Mark is that, like, right now we are scheduling my calendar for me to be very present on campuses and very present with MDs, so that way I can be modeling the same fidelity and accountability around execution that we need to be cascading down through the organization. So we take these scores incredibly seriously, and it's not lost on us where we end up, particularly in literacy.
Well, I thank you for saying that. I also know that we have incredible dedication and bandwidth in terms of ways to solve problems, and board members that will help you with that as well. So we will succeed. We'll forge ahead for the right reasons. So we'll now turn to the Uplift grading policy. This particular policy was sent out to you. Brought it up 2 previous meetings of the board, and also we had a special meeting, and I want to thank you all for your comments over the last couple of meetings and sending emails in. I think that the work has been very carefully done, Rich, by you and Remy. I think I saw Remy walk in.
All right.
Okay.
And her team.
And her team.
And Mark helped out as one of his first projects.
Excellent, excellent. Well, thank you. Remy, I really want to recognize you, though, for the fine work done. It was a lot of effort, and you had to get a lot of input from a lot of different sources because we kept asking you questions. So I want to thank you very much for that. At this point, we have a huge agenda, and I think that rather than going into a lengthy discussion, we may have pros and cons of how we feel about this particular policy. It was distributed. I think you all are aware of it. If you have any particular questions, please voice them now, but I would prefer going ahead and taking this to a vote as it was presented online. Do I hear any questions before I ask for a vote?
I have a question really more on implementation, because it sounds like there's multiple phases, but the product is pretty much done. Are we anticipating that going from phase 1 to phase 3 is really just tweaks, whatever feedback we get, or is there really some additional data coming?
Good question. Want to talk about that, Remy? Sorry, Remy, the question, I don't know if you want to come forward, is around just talking about the implementation timeline slide, and about how there's work related to the training on this specific policy now, and then over the next couple of years, what you'll be considering as potential refinements and what that looks like.
Yes, so phase 1, this is probably the biggest phase, and so the majority of the work has been done by establishing a new policy and philosophy. The second phase is more looking at an actual different grading scale. So although it's heavy lifting, it's just one component of a potential iteration of our grading policy, but that's something that we'll spend another full year learning about and researching to figure out if that works. So this year, the first phase is really getting this policy passed and then training our leaders, supporting our teachers in the work, and then also monitoring throughout the school year what this looks like, what kind of impact it's actually having on the work that we're doing.
You go through an evaluation, sometimes you don't actually want to do a new grading scale, and then you would see phase 3 drama. Or we could say, actually, we think there's some value to it, and then you would see that. But there's nothing for you to see right at this point in time. Right now, phase 1 is the execution of this specific policy. We just wanted to paint a roadmap of like longer term. If we come back in December with something, you knew that we still had aspects we were studying.
I would just say from personal experience with this, that this isn't just like one random kid, that this is lots of kids, including high-performing kids with senioritis that fall off and need some way to get back to where they were. So I appreciated the fact that
Says a mother of a
that we had some generous practices in the spring of 2017. Because those zeros, just mathematically, they kill you. And a lot of kids have scholarships that are dependent on having a B average, and you got these, kids that know the content, and they just have whatever. There's some examples here, but it's not just low performing kids that can benefit sometimes from falling off the wagon a little bit.
Thank you. Any other questions or comments? If I could, I'd like to have a motion that this grading policy be accepted as presented. Do I hear a motion?
I move we approve the policy as presented.
Second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Thank you very much. Carries. Okay. So now we're going to go to the finance update. And Jack, I know you and your committee have been working hard, and we had some unusual information presented at the last board meeting. So I think we're eager to hear.
Well, Stacy and I talked about it. I think what we'll do, why don't we just, Stacy, just lead us through the packet, and then we'll talk specifically when it comes to the budget.
Okay, very good. Hi, everyone. Should I control this right? So we'll go through the dashboard real quick. We'll go through, if this is maybe your first time through, I don't know, but just to re-familiarize you, at the end of the 16-17 year, we're 3 days away from that, we get to adopt a new budget. And we want this budget to look like what we think actuals are going to be. And this is a routine that we have every year, so nothing new, but just as a reminder, this is what we do at the end of every school year. We're presenting a budget to you to adopt as a new one. Your final budget is what we think our actuals will look like for the year. Then we'll talk about our 17-18 proposed budget. So the dashboard, just a few things to highlight for you here that's different from the one we saw in May. We have ended the year, we're going to average about 15.5 for the whole school year, about 157 short of where we want it to be. And that's why we've left that as yellow. Despite the fact that we're off, we hit the attendance number, but the students that we did have actually drove more state revenue than budgeted. So that's why we've despite being off quite a bit, we've left that as yellow. On the cash and liquidity side, this is 6 days higher than we showed you in May, and that's reflective of improved or accelerated state and federal cash receipts. And then on the expense side, this is quite a bit better than last time, and I'll walk you through that as we look at the amended budget for 16-17 that came out in the pre-read. Just a few things to call out for you. Revenues, as you saw, were very similar to what we showed you in May, but where the pickup has been, for the most part, has been in the personnel line. Two things really driving that. In our previous forecast, we had seasonality for the month of June. We just had too much salary that we thought was going to hit in June, when in fact it's going to be less for this month. So we adjusted our seasonality as we think about projecting cash flows for next year. And then as we looked into non-salary pay on a more granular level than we have been doing, this would be stipends or substitutes or overtime, extra duty. We had just over forecasted on those other non-salary types of pay a little bit. So that's what's driving the variance. Those two items are driving the variance in that personnel line item. And then there are other bigger change is in our curriculum, textbooks, instructional materials line. We actually have just deferred some of that allotment to the 17-18 school year for acquiring materials for next year. So any questions on the 16-17 proposed amendment budget?
So, that being the case, Finance Committee, met last week, went through it all, Stacy, other than a couple of these, minor tweaks, we've adopted and approved it, so at this point, we'll look for a motion from the board. Approve the budget.
Would you like, I'll make that
Sure,
motion.
I'll make that motion.
Second. Second. Mr. Beer, second?
Second.
Thank you. All in favor? Motion? Aye. Opposed? Carries. Thank you. Arthur, did you have a
Already have a
question?
question.
Oh,
Yeah, I was still reading when you were asking for a second, so I apologize. So I didn't. That's fine.
moving on.
Okay. So for 17-18, just this would be kind of the one slide if you wanted to have in your Uplift binder, or you carry around about Uplift key facts with some of the key figures for next year. Targeted enrollment. There are a handful of tweaks that we've made to what went out of the pre-read. They're very minor, and we'll highlight those. This is one. Targeted enrollment is actually down to 20 students, where we've adjusted pre-K targeted enrollment at the campuses that will serve Infinity and Luna. We had 4 sections of pre-K, when in fact those kindergarten classes are only 3 sections. And so we've ratcheted down the expectation with our partner Escalita for how big those pre-Ks will be. We still are, so we're going to crack that 17,000 barrier. We're still going to, consistent with this year, have targeted 96.5% attendance rate. As it relates to the total revenues, near 190 million. Some meaningful increases in state revenue, some of that due to mix. We've got about 11% scholar growth. That was driving a good chunk of that. And then on the local revenue side, everybody probably recalls our Hammond gift that over the course of the last few years we've been benefiting from. You'll see you saw in the pre-read, a large increase in local revenue. That is just a revenue recognition issue or timing. It's not that we've gotten that much more in cash inflows. This is a non-cash revenue recognition, the timing, the way that gift was structured. The total expenses are in the $172 million range. That gives us what looks like a really high debt service coverage ratio of 1.8. But if you back the Hammond gift out, that's going to put us down to about 1.4, very close to the 1.35 that I think was the 16-17 original budget that you adopted. So at 1.3 or 1.4 range is a healthy budget. And at this point, we're saying 67 days of cash on hand by this time next year. And so that plan, there is a planned dip over this time period here where we go through the next couple of years of opening schools. So as we open 2 schools this year, White Rock Hills and Penfield Secondary, Fort Worth next year, we do expect cash to dip slightly, but this is within the range that we presented with our most recent bond projections. So this page is, this page is a lot of numbers I'm not going to walk through, but I know some people like to see the budget cut up in various ways compared to this current year's original budget, the amended budget on either percent basis or dollars per scholar basis. So at this point, I'll just open it up to any questions.
Yeah, I had a question about whether you're doing any contingency planning around the governor's announcement of the $1,000 teacher raise.
Yes, we've gotten an update on it, and so we have been keeping close tabs on it. And what we understand is that it does not expect, there's no plan from the governor's office that it would be implemented for this next 2-year period. That simply he wants to try to tee up the idea, because in the next session, what we were told is they think there's $800 million to be able to put towards funding it, and that there's also more guidance that they want to release around. It's not $1,000 across the board per teacher, but rather an average, and there's some guidance that will be based on master teacher versus not. And so what we were told is not to worry about trying to factor it in, since right now it's an unfunded mandate, which we're obviously highly worried about. And so Addie confirmed with the governor's office that there is no expectation of implementation for this legislative cycle, and that he wants to tee it up with then more specificity and likely funding in the next cycle.
My
That's what we've
understanding
heard.
was that was the Commissioner Morass proposal, but that wasn't where the governor was. So the latest thing we proposed was, if he's gonna do it, which we hope it doesn't get to it,
Great.
but that he would add $1,000 to each of the minimum salary schedule levels, which wouldn't impact any
Not us.
urbans,
Yeah.
because of market rates, all the urbans are already paying well above the minimum salary schedule. So that's kind of just to let you know, and I'll let
Okay.
Addie know, as a backup plan.
That's great.
If it isn't pushed out and put on more performance pay, which we would support,
Yep.
and funded,
Yep.
that our backup plan is minimum salary schedule.
Great, that's super helpful. And I'm actually supposed to talk to Addie while I'm driving from work, so I'll give her that
Okay.
update
Okay.
also. That is
Yeah.
Any other questions about 1718? What we've got on the board is actually slightly different. Still this real quick. So you do see the latest and greatest. So what Jack was alluding to earlier, that we've got just these few last minute tweaks that we have made since the board pre-read went out. A couple of areas that we identified we felt were worthy to adjust. You'll see coverage is only 2 basis points different. So down 1.79 coverage versus the 1.81 that went out in your deck. So I've walked Jack through these changes to what we made, and he's supportive of those.
So, do we need a separate?
Yes.
So, for 2017-18 budget, then you would like a motion to approve that as well?
Please,
I'm making that.
make your motion. Do I hear a
Second.
second? Thank you.
Mhm.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Carries. Thank you both very much, and your teams. Both teams. Yeah. Excellent work. Excellent.
Did you have a close look on the TEA conversation we had about
Oh,
the
yeah.
seasonal budget?
You don't
We
thought
talked
about
last
that?
time. I know
Right,
everyone was
yes.
so worried about it.
Yeah,
I
I didn't make it up.
You were
about that. So the conversations that were concerns that we were having in terms of feedback from Region 10 and TEA about this new special allotments monitoring program they rolled out, and how that might impact our approach to budgeting for our state compensatory education program and our ESL program especially. I had a conversation with the director of the Audit and Financial Compliance Division, TEA, that really kind of put previous conversations on their head. And so the resolution after speaking with him was that our approach was sort of appropriate for us to be following. If you recall, we had talked about how Title I schools, which all of our campuses, except for North Hills, are Title I schools. There's a Title I construct called school-wide, or a new Title I campus will be deemed targeted assistance for a while. Greater or lesser flexibility. If you're school-wide, it's greater flexibility. And they confirmed that we can think of use that school-wide construct with state comp ed, which is not the feedback we've been given initially, but David confirmed it's appropriate to think of state comp ed as being for those campuses that are school-wide, or being a school-wide program. So which makes accounting for and planning for the use of those funds much more streamlined. And it's a very favorable result of that conversation. There were some changes to, excuse me, to our ESL program, however, and those changes are reflected in the budget that you just approved.
Okay. Should we go ahead and do investment policy?
Yeah.
Great.
I didn't think it'd be worth necessarily showing that. The investment policy went out in your pre-read. We've made just some minor tweaks everywhere that referred to board of trustees, we call it board of governors, and removed a couple of types of investment options that we've never used and don't anticipate using, took those out of the policy. So fairly minor updates that the finance committee reviewed last week.
What I'd add to that would be, this is a policy that it's kind of a standardized policy that we've taken and we are adopting, and we need to approve. We're also indicating that some of this still is not quite applicable to us, so it's going to make sense for us to kind of review this over the course of next year and kind of clean it up some more. But for all intents and purposes, it functions very well as it is, but we'll still want to clean it up. So I think for that, we'll also want to make another motion to approve our investment policy. Need a second?
Do I hear a second? Thank you. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Carries. Thank you again. The Finance Committee's been very busy this year. Thank you. Appreciate it. Okay, let's go to Yasmin and the update on the potential Fort Worth ISD collaboration.
Great. I'm going to just send around a letter from Superintendent Scribner. He apologizes that he was not able to make today's board meeting, nor was someone from his senior staff. They have a board meeting happening at the same exact time, and his board is getting to learn more about Uplift. So I could not be with them either. And I'm glad to be here with all of you. We've talked about this a couple of times in board meetings. I just wanted to continue to give you a really brief update. When Superintendent Scribner was in Arizona, he tried to do a partnership school like our school with Grand Prairie ISD, and he politically wasn't able to pull it off with the trustees that he had at the time. And so when he got to Fort Worth, and he's been thinking about how to boldly turn around some of their schools and think about a range of options and choices, he was really intrigued by the work that we were doing with the Grand Prairie ISD and how that school was structured. Interestingly, they are replicating for this upcoming school year the DISD ACE Schools program, where there's a set of really high-need schools that you go in and stipend teachers an additional $10,000 per year for 3 years to try to get great talent to go into those schools and drive up performance. That is similarly being funded through philanthropic dollars, and he realizes that long-term and in a larger scalable way, that's not the play. And so as he thinks about a range of options, he did want to think about on his radar as a partnership school with Uplift, very similar, going into a primary school in a high needs area of Fort Worth, and doing something very similar where we're co-operating a school. Probably the way the split would work is in Fort Worth ISD, they have a very strong dual language program, and that is not what we do for our English as second language students. We do English instruction with then targeted support. And so they would continue to support the children who need to be in a dual language Spanish-only instruction environment. And then we would support the children who would be in an English-only instructed environment. Right now, the thought is there's a couple different thoughts on primary school, so I won't get into like which primary school and which part of town, because that's still an ongoing conversation to bring back for in September. But the current thought is we would take on kind of pre-K or K or K and 1, and then just grow just like we did in Grand Prairie ISD. So we'd start with a small number of children. We're thinking 150, something incredibly manageable, so we can have a really strong year just like we did in Grand Prairie ISD. We have received some preliminary grant funding to hire a project manager similar to what we had in Grand Prairie ISD to launch working groups between the district and Uplift at the end of this summer, early fall, to go through all of the nuances of how this relationship works. As you recall, it took us about 6 months to iron out all those details, even leveraging the GPISD Uplift partnership document. So that will be a full-time employee's job to basically manage how those details will come together across joint working committees. And then we also have received grant funding to hire a principal a year in advance who would spend the first semester at Uplift. If they were an internal person, then it would look different, but right now our finalist is an external candidate. And then the second half of their year in Fort Worth at the school that they would be going to in order to continue to build relationships with families and start transitioning those systems. And so we hope in the next couple weeks we'll have that person lined up and in place. And so right now, the next couple months is about identifying that leader as well as hiring that project manager and locking in the school that we would be going into on the Fort Worth ISD side. And then in the fall, kicking off these planning groups with the intent, similar to last time, late winter, early spring, bringing you all a partnership agreement. If you all remember, you guys had a social with the Grand Prairie ISD board in the early fall to get to know them, as you know, everybody's getting to know each other and getting ready for an arranged marriage. And we will have to do that in Fort Worth, just like we had to do it in Grand Prairie. Their board cannot have quorum outside of their geographic area. And so we'll get something of that nature scheduled. But right now, what you're seeing from Superintendent Scribner is what you saw from Dr. Hull when she came and saw you all at the board meeting a couple of years ago, is basically his commitment of, if we start this planning process, like, he is committed to a year from now doing a partnership school together and is not going to get wishy-washy on it. So he wanted you to have that in terms of his formal commitment. He had already previewed this with his board at their last meeting, and his board is also supportive. And at today's meeting, they are getting a write-up on Uplift and an overview of the Grand Prairie ISD partnership, so they can also give him the kind of official green light of keep on trucking. And so that is our plan, is to keep the process going unless there is any different guidance to me. But over the past couple of meetings that we've talked about this for the last, I guess since December, I've tried to sprinkle it in as we've had early conversations. The feeling I've gotten is that folks were supportive of this direction, and so that's kind of a very high-level update of where we are, and wanted you to have this letter from Superintendent Scribner. So any questions or any change in guidance that I should know about?
Well, one question just for clarification. You mentioned the distinction between dual language students being taught Spanish and English speaking. Is it otherwise going to be an administrative decision about if students are on the same campus in the Fort Worth primary Gates K-1 or the Uplift charter? Versus, because we had obviously a choice environment in Grand Prairie.
Great question. Thank you for raising that. So Superintendent Scribner has a different philosophy on enrollment than the way they do it in Grand Prairie. And we're actually really excited about it because we can be focused on our time and energy. He just wants to, he has a couple of schools in mind, and he wants to just go into that school and literally say, here you go, Uplift, you get this group of kids, we're not enrolling, we're not going to deal with the choice program, and do you want to come to this school or that school, which actually took a ton of time. Instead, he's like, I need you to move these kids, and y'all have an incredibly strong kinder program. Like,
So just be an administrative process.
Yes, he's going to administratively decide, and that's why it's actually pretty clean,
Yeah.
because of the dual language versus
And
non-dual language.
I'm sorry, but then we don't have these same issues in terms of potential under-enrollment at the
You don't have those issues at all.
partnerships.
You don't have any of those issues, which has been
Stacy
like a
likes.
real challenge.
So if it's just a
Yes.
certain fraction of the kids in the school, like what kind of percentage are we talking about?
From the start, I've been like very intentional of, we want it to be a home run, like it has been for Grand Prairie. I mean, Grand Prairie feels really excited about Uplift Lead scores that officially count for Grand Prairie ISD in terms of their accountability. And so I was like, we want to start with a small number of kids, small number of grades, and prove it and work up from there. And so eventually we would have probably about 40 to 50% of the school, depending on what student population we go into. It's a pretty high ESL population in the school he's thinking about, but it's also a much bigger primary than typically an Uplift primary. So that 40 to 50% will end up being around the size of a typical Uplift primary, just in a much bigger building. So to me, it was optimizing around what do we know, and feel like we could have confidence in, and that we're set up for success. The very first conversation back in December was, can I give you an entire school K-5? Will you learn dual language? And the answer was no and no. So I feel like we've gotten to like the right place in terms of what is set up to be successful.
Yasmin, once a student is designated as Uplift, you're getting these students. I mean, they stick, but from then on, there are students. They'll stick with it.
Yes, especially with
They
this.
can't like rejigger it every year, right?
No, because especially with this way that it's being drawn. Now, you could definitely have a child exited from a dual language program, and we could inherit a child, which is great. Like, that is not,
Right.
like, that's a good thing for that child, and
Right.
we're happy to have that.
But it's not
But you're not gonna see the,
It's not
you're not
sort
gonna
of
see the reverse
totally
happen.
random every year.
No, it's not gonna be totally random, but over time, like, you would hope you'd see children exited. I think under their model, if you do see children being exited, it's probably gonna be in later grades. I mean, their STAR scores are vastly different for the kids who take Spanish STAR versus English STAR, right? So like, for example, this one campus we were looking at, they have 70% pass rates for the children who take Spanish STAR and 40% pass rates for the children who take English. And so, there's just some of the dynamics that are playing. Kathy, I know you know what works super well as well. So.
That just may be something tied out in our ultimate agreements to make sure that
Yes, and that's why we're gonna spend 6 months.
We want you to have them, yeah.
Lawyer
Let's
team.
exhibit those,
Yeah.
yank those.
They were great.
That's a very good point. They were great.
Your third grade scores are great. We're gonna take all those and give you all these new ones.
Yes, absolutely, we'll nail all of that down. If y'all recall, we had, I think, 10 working group teams that were the HR team, the enrollment team, the legal team, the finance team, the instructional team, the special education team. And so we will definitely, I'll note that early on, we'll make sure that that stays clear, because we don't want to have that transition happening. We see that right now in Grand Prairie, because what happens if a child shows up in January, Lee says, hey, I'm not sure we want this child, like, here you go, Uplift. And so we've gone in, we're trying to go in and like work on how do we adjust really more what that looks like, but you learn along the way. And so, yes, like, we are learning all around on that.
As part of the planning process, recognizing it's not a short-term issue, but the long-term issue of transitioning a student from a Uplift school, Uplift charter within a primary to what they do for middle school, like we've had discussions at Grand Prairie.
Yes.
Is that going to be part of the
Yes, it's
long-term
definitely
planning?
part of it. And in fact, one of the things that Superintendent Scribner was excited about is the fact that we're IB. And so the schools he's thinking of right now are in their IB feeder pattern for middle school and high school. He's been pretty narrow and disciplined about it. And for him, it's also a way of because these schools are not his ACE type schools that he's piloting that model of, it's a way of adding value to those primary schools and giving them something extra that puts them, though, in a very thoughtful way on an IB trajectory in middle school and high school. So we will have, as part of these granular conversations, we'll have the conversation of, do we stay with them K-12? Do they come over to an Uplift school at some point? Do we actually do our job in K-5 or pre-K-5 and then they're okay going into an IB, an already existing IB program? That part is still to be fleshed out.
Any other questions? Well, I think it's terrific that we're moving this ball forward as quickly as we are, and I think, again, going back to the strategic plan, this has always been a part of it, and so this is very exciting, so thank you. All your work when we're done. Wonderful. Okay, I think we'll turn it over to Governance Committee.
Sure. Thank you, Melissa. Certainly annual ballots. And if all of you could please take a look at it and vote. On the front page, it's for voting by trustees and governors. And it's essentially voting on new or renewing terms for trustees, as well as the governors at large. And then on the back is voting by governors for existing governors and officers. And so if you could do that before we leave and then hand it back to Ann, we could have this all tallied up today.
And there's a flip side as well.
Yeah, there is a flip side. And that flip side is for voting by the governors. And then one note is for a new trustee that we'd be voting on is Mike Giles. And he's been on the board previously, and he took off a year, but we're now voting him back on as a trustee. And finally, we do have some news about 2 retiring board members. Those 2 members are Angela Farley and Randy Ray. I'm sure you guys will be very much missed and really appreciative of all the years. But with that said, I think I'll hand it off to Melissa for some.
Well, of course, I have to say something. You know that. So, okay, Angela, I'll start with you. Just going around the corner. Well, we've known each other a very long time. Before I was involved with Uplift, and you were a young parent at North Hills with 2 sons who have now both graduated. The last in May, this last May. Very excited for you and your family, needless to say. You have been a remarkable addition to North Hills from the beginning, and not only did you support your children and our scholars, you supported the school in so many different ways. I can't even begin to enumerate them, but you served as the chair of the advisory board when we had an advisory board. You helped us transition over to the campus advisory councils. You worked with every director there's been. You the communication link between the parents organization and the school and the advisory councils and the board. And then you go on to become the senior vice president of education at Dallas Regional Chamber, which of course is, they were so lucky to get you. And we were so lucky to have your advice and information on issues that you brought to the table, as you did again today. So we just can't thank you enough, really, for all your years of service, but also know that you're going to stay with us as an ear to the ground. You'll communicate with the board and the CMO as issues come up, and we really deeply appreciate it. So thank you. So thank you.
So Angela, we have our standard departing director gift in terms of a photo frame with pictures from Uplift North Hills and Uplift in general, so that you can have it. And for those of you who are newer board members, 10 plus years ago, like the board that Angela was chair of was like literally doing this exercise and building budgets for our schools and helping our school leaders learn how to manage them and making like really granular decisions. And it was such a pleasure to work with you back then and to watch just you take on new opportunities and to change the way that we were engaging, the way that we were providing support to our broader organization. So
Thank you. Appreciate it. Chamber, so hopefully we'll be attending chamber.
Thank you. Well, you're not leaving us, we know that.
Yeah.
Good. So Randy, okay. Randy's sort of my partner in crime, and has been for a long time, but he started well before that. He also is a parent to young scholars and got involved with Peak Preparatory very early, and jumped in 2009 to the advisory board there. Then, of course, was there for about a year before it became the chair. I mean, you know, it didn't take long before talent was noted, and with that, of course, you become trustee, as of course Angela was. We were so lucky then have him transition as a trustee into the facilities committee as a member, and he quickly gained the respect of Eric Goodlow, who's our PMSI project manager, because as we all know, Randy has a very incisive mind, but he's also a lawyer, and he's very detailed oriented and can help with contracts immensely. He read every word, and I can honestly say I relied on you totally for that. So at any rate, he went on to become the facilities chair, and he's been that for 3 years, and he is the most dedicated board member in terms of every Tuesday. He is at the office here with the meeting that is critical to moving our projects along and making sure that they stay timely, dealing with any legal issues, and believe me, there are a zillion of them. I just really can't say thank you enough for all you've done. You've also been incredible in terms of quorum. You're always here when we have special hearings. You're always one of the members that are there, and you always are willing to say, make the motion. So bring closure to our discussions. At any rate, he has, I've twisted his arm as many times as I can, and he finally has said he will stay involved with the real estate
By phone.
committee.
He was very clear about that.
By phone. And again, we will continue to rely on your good judgment and your knowledge. So thank you very much.
Have a withdrawal on Tuesday mornings from getting to spend special time with you, and I definitely know that I've enjoyed our real estate meetings more than our expulsion hearings, which I think as well, because Randy has always been willing to preside over those. And I think one of my favorite memories of when you were chair at Peak, like many, many moons ago, was Randy and his team were so invested in showing appreciation to our teachers, and at the holiday party, they would do these raffles, and there would be bottles of wine, but you can't bring alcohol onto a school campus. And so you'd like meet them in like another parking lot and give them these bottles of wine in their car. And I love the creativity. And that was carried through in our real estate deals. So
Yeah, thank you.
yeah.
And that's all I have.
Great. So if we could quickly do this, and then we can pass it over to Dan and Alex and Matt, who's over calculating, that'd be great. So while we're listening to our last presentation, remember last month we decided we'd spotlight some exciting things that are happening. And I had the benefit of going to a training where we had Chris talk to us about career and technical education. And I was just blown away by it. So at any rate, would you please join us? And we'd appreciate it very much.
Hey guys, so Chris Lowick, I'm the Career and Technical Education Curriculum Coordinator. I just want to start with just our vision for CTE. We strive to inspire innovation, collaboration, and engagement within our classrooms that really builds strong college and career readiness skills that will enable our scholars to be successful in current and emerging technologies. At Uplift, CT is based on a comprehensible input approach where we really focus on 4 college and career readiness skills, and that's think, know, act, and go. Think is dealing with mostly like managing or mastering the content of what they're learning. Know is all about developing those cognitive strategies so that they can learn better. Act is taking ownership of that learning, and go is acquiring the knowledge so that they can be successful in transitions. And really our goal is to build lifelong learners that have college and career ready communication and critical thinking skills. And so that's our vision. I want to kind of show you what we've done this year and what we've been able to do through this program. Start with 4 figures. The first one on the left, 93%. This is the national average of high school graduation rate for students concentrating in CT programs. I'm proud to say that at Uplift, we are able to boast just over 99% of our scholars graduating with the concentration in CT, so that's really great. 75% nationally CT scholars who pursued post-secondary education immediately after high school. Again, we can do better than that, and so at Uplift, we can actually boast that 92% of our scholars immediately go into post-secondary education. CT at Uplift previously has served over 94% of our scholars, so they've been enrolled in a CT course of some form. This year, I just got this figure. Really great to hear that this year we were able to push that to 100%. So we're actually 100% of our scholars are enrolled in a CT course over the 16-17 school year. And then over the last 3 years, we've averaged credits earned in CTE with our high school graduates at 3.6. And so that's when they graduate after 12th grade when they graduate. So that's how it benefits our scholars. I want to talk just a minute about the course offerings that we have. There are 16 career clusters nationally, and of those 16, we focus on 4 career clusters. We have our audio video on the left, information technology next, STEM, and then health sciences. And then each of these course tracks that you see here are our programs of study, and these are our recommended course progressions. We start at the top with the 9th grade professional communication for all, and then we go into 10th grade and kind of break down individually to individual courses. And then 11th and 12th grade, so each as you make your way down, those are the different grade levels. And then additionally, we offer other CT courses that tie into these one of these 4 clusters. And one of the really unique things that we do that we haven't found really in other networks and other school districts is that we blend International Baccalaureate with our CT program. If you go to other school districts and charter networks, you'll really see like this separation. You know, you'll have the scholars and students will be able to enroll in either IB or CT, but not so much together. And this is one of the things that we do. We found that it's really a good blend and it fits well. And we think that it provides a more rigorous curriculum for them to where they can be more successful in college and career and be prepared for that later as they move forward. So these are our main course offerings. Hopefully we would like to add some more soon. So how does CT benefit our network? Over $6.5 million in revenue from the state and $180,000 from our federal Perkins grant. This helps us provides our funding for lots of various things like CT teacher salaries, things in our classrooms like CNC machines and 3D printers and various equipment that our scholars can use and get their hands on and be able to really get some good use out of to be able to develop those skills that they need to be successful. Teacher and scholar travel to different competitions and professional development opportunities. Program improvement and connections to our industry. So just all these different things that it helps us fund. And then just want to kind of end with how we need help. This year we were able, and I'm so excited that we were able to start and implement our CTA Advisory Committee, and we had our first CTA Advisory Committee meeting just last month. Our CTA Advisory Committee is created to help us do mainly two things: help determine our program and just what courses that we offer in the programs we study, the career clusters that we focus on, and to provide us insight into the industry, the trends, the equipment that we need to have in our classrooms, and those sort of things. And they meet twice a year. So I'd love if you know somebody who is either a parent or works in one of those 4 industries that we currently offer. I'd love to connect with them and talk to them about how they can be a part of this advisory committee. And then also partnership with events. So this year we had our very first annual Uplift Film Festival. We've had previously at different campuses film festivals where our scholars totally create, they write, direct, and produce the entire film. And we've done that on the campus level, but this year we were able to bring that together with 3 of our campuses participating and competing against each other to show off their films that they created. We did that at the Angelica Theater right here in Dallas, and so it was really great to put that together. And then also we do STEM breakout sessions at our Uplift Science Fair. And so just partnership with that and how we can build those out better to where we can integrate our STEM program more into this event. And then also we have robotics competitions around our network, and so we need help partnering with that as well, and how we can take that beyond just our area and hopefully to a national level in competition as well. So that's our CT spotlight.
Any questions for Chris?
Did Angelica provide that for you, or did you have to pay?
We had to rent the space. Yeah.
Cinemark might be interested.
Yeah. Yeah.
Well, I'm meeting with them in July, so if you could send me what your, like, the dates, how many people, how long you need it, I could take it to Cinemark.
I'll connect you to
Anybody who knows anyone to serve on the advisory committee, again, this is just beginning and it's very exciting. Again, we've just done an incredibly good job with this entire program, and I was just blown away. I also went to the Angelica, and the films are just fabulous. The students are the actors as well as everything else, and so you see these kids, and they're going, "You were just that terrible girl that was mean." Whatever. And of course, they're all hanging on each other, so it's an uplifting experience. What can I say? Chris, thank you very much. Really appreciate it. Okay, we've got another action item, and it is to consider and take action on the appointment of Alex Burke, Senior Director of Legal Affairs, as the superintendent for notice purposes and also as a registered agent for Uplift.
So that basically means anything from TEA goes to Alex, which used to go to Ann.
Okay.
Because no one trusts for those things to go. Given the legal nature of those notices, that's why we were hoping that our new in-house counsel would happily play that role.
Absolutely.
It does 50 emails a month for multiple
Yes.
vendors, and,
Yeah.
and when the police officer comes to serve.
So,
So we need to get this approved.
yes, we need to get this approved.
Anne's ready to hand over now.
All right.
I got the key already, so.
So any further comments from you, Ann, on this?
No, this is an official handover to somebody who I know is very capable of doing it. So it's just a final thing we need to do.
Great, okay, well, we need to have a motion for approval.
I move we approve.
Thank you. Second? Yes. Second. All in favor? Aye. Opposed? Carried, so.
Okay, I do have to, as a TEA one, I have to send it around for signature.
I've got 2 other things that aren't specifically on the agenda right now. One is we have a guest who's just arrived, James Stanton. Say hi.
Hello.
James has been very interested in getting involved, and is an attorney here in Dallas and has a wonderful legal career, and has kids, 3, and I'll let you tell us about
I've got
your involvement.
three scholars at North Hills, a graduating 4th grader, 2nd grader, and 1st grader. In 2 more years, I'll have a 4th. There, starting there.
And you've been very involved in North Hills.
I have been. Yes, my oldest, who is now graduating 4th grade, started there as a kindergartner, and all the kids have gone there throughout their career. So, very active public school kid myself, 1st generation college graduate myself, and so very interested in my kids going to the school with the real world, and we believe that Uplift is that. So, very excited, Melissa. Thank you for the introduction.
Thank you.
Well, look forward to getting more involved.
Well, we're excited. We ended up talking about what might be a good fit, and one of the ideas was partnering with Kathleen Cruz on Infinity, and we had coffee the other day, and I think you guys were off and running before we even got halfway through the conversation. So, assuming all work goes well there, James will be joining the Infinity, be a member of the Infinity CAC. So thank you very much. We look forward to having you welcoming in all meetings. Everyone's always welcome. So.
Thank you.
Then the last thing is very mixed emotions. I say thank you to Ann Stevenson for 17 years of unparalleled. There's really nothing to say about Ann that hasn't already been said a zillion times in all of her incredible work that she's done. She's had so many hats that I can't even begin to go through them, and so I won't. But we wish you well, and we're trying to make sure that we can lure her back to be a member of the facilities committee. So, never too far away, though, I know that. So.
Well, thank you all very much. It's been great to work. Organization.
Good. Thank you. So I think we've got one closing thing, and the ballots just came back, and in terms of
We are, congratulations to all.
and with that, I open it up to the community forum. Is there anyone who's registered to sign up to speak? I hear no one interested in doing that. That's great, because we will adjourn for the summer. See you all in August.